I feel like the biggest mistakes in my career have been things that I didn't do. You got to tell people what you want because then they can help you get it. Never feel bad about wanting something because you probably deserve it.
So the first question that I love asking when I meet some like really exciting people is, what's your story? Like, how did you get here? Like, what was the path that took you here? Were you like, you know, at the age of like, whatever, like 20, 21, 22, you were like, I want to be a data scientist. I'm going to be that. Like, how did you get here? Or let's start with you.
Sure. For me, it wasn't like I want to be a data scientist when I was 21, 22, mostly because when I was 21, 22, there was not really, data science wasn't really a thing. I feel like for me, there's been a lot of coincidences that have brought me here. I mean, I studied in France. That's where I'm from, where I was doing like mostly applied math engineering studies, but like mostly on the theoretical side. And I was also really interested in transportation. And so I went to Berkeley for what was at the beginning an internship in a transportation group, and then turned into a PhD in like machine learning, but still applied to transportation. I was basically doing ETAs from GPS data. And then during my during my internship, during my PhD, one of my PhD advisors was like, "Oh, you should like try an internship, kind of pick up some hacking skills and things like that." And so I interned at Facebook, and I don't know if I picked up much hacking skills, but I realized that there was a lot of things really interesting for me to do there. Like my first intuition was like, well, I've been doing like mostly applied math, and like what else would I do besides academia? And then I realized that there was actually a lot of things that were a really good fit for me and for like the kind of intellectual stimulation I was interested in. And so I came back from my internship and I was like, well, actually, I don't think I'm going to do academia. And there's like a lot of really exciting things to do for me in that data science team at Facebook. And that's kind of how I landed there. And so it's something that I've really enjoyed as like both combining the research component that I came from, as well as solving real world problem and like having an impact that's measured on the world rather than the number of people who read my papers.
Amen on the last part, for sure. MC?
Cool. So I didn't actually realize we would be two Frenchies on the panel, but so I'm also from France. I think I had the same curriculum at the beginning. So I liked mathematics in high school. I went for applied mathematics and physics, and then I got into the, we have engineering school that are, the system is a bit different than in the US, and we get to try basically every type of engineering. So you do a little bit of mechanical engineering, civil engineering, financial engineering, etc. I still liked mathematics, so I went for financial engineering. And then I decided that really was too theoretical. So I tried 6 months of investment banking, which wasn't theoretical enough. So I went back to the mathematics and data field. That's how I arrived in San Francisco. And I loved it so much. I stayed for a master's degree at UC Berkeley, where I got to develop more my machine learning skills, my coding skills in general. And I could see through the projects how applied, like you can get a job where you get to do theoretical stuff in applied real world problems, which I loved. And I always liked transportation. And I think at the time I thought Uber was the perfect fit for me. And I guess I ended up at the right place. And yeah, it's been 3 years and I still love it. So here you go.
I didn't major in any kind of mathematical field. I was a linguistics major, and I particularly was focusing on a subfield called quantitative sociolinguistics, which is like using social variation to model the way people talk. And I thought all of the quantitative stuff, and that was super cool. I loved getting my feet wet with R, and I wanted to find more ways to do statistical modeling while still staying within my linguistics field. Which led me to a subfield called computational linguistics, which a lot of people now know as NLP. Things have worked out. But I was finishing school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to spend more time in academia. So I thought I would move to the Bay Area and work as a computer programmer because I liked programming and had done a bit of that in my coursework. And I could not convince anyone to hire me as a developer, but I did, in a weird twist of fate, end up getting hired as a linguist for a natural language search startup. And I worked a ton on their query parser, and in the course of doing that job, picked up a ton of other data-related roles. So I did analytics for them. I would build scripts to like automate their Twitter feed, annotate data sets for machine learning, and started doing a little bit of machine learning stuff by the end as well. And at the end of that, that company ended up going out of business, and I just decided to pivot into a more data-related role generally. So I spent some time in ad tech as an analyst and then later as a data scientist. And after a couple of years of doing that, a recruiter from Reddit reached out, and I've been there ever since. I get to do a bunch of really cool and different stuff at Reddit. We got lots of weird data that's both weird in that it's like confusing, but also delightful. There's just no shortage of interesting problems to get to work on. So I really like being there.
So you were doing NLP before NLP was there?
I mean, kind of. You could generously say that field's existed for several decades, but it wasn't as trendy up until recently. Like 2013 is about when like we started having all those really big advancements, and that was like right when I was finishing school. So I didn't learn any of that in school and had to figure it out afterwards.
Katie, the next question's for you. You've been a founding member of a lot of the data science teams and a lot of best practices at Reddit. And you've obviously heard this a ton of times that data science is the most promising. There are other adjectives for that job of this decade, and some people say even this century. Mm-hmm. And you know, when people come to you and say, "Hey, how do I get into that? How do I get that promise going?" Like, what's your answer for like what's the most optimal path? And I think like the bigger question is there really an optimal path to be a data scientist?
Yeah, I don't think there's one way to be a data scientist. First of all, like I was just saying earlier that I've been having conversations with people about like, are you a data scientist or are you a machine learning engineer? And like we'll be talking about it and then realize halfway through the conversation that like my definition of a data scientist is their definition of a machine learning engineer and vice versa. No one can really agree what these fields mean. And I really think that one day the title data scientist will be something like webmaster, where it's like, it was like super generalist, and like it just ended up specializing to a bunch of different things. So like with that background, how do you become a data scientist? This very vague thing. I think it depends on what you want to do. There are a lot of ways, a lot of paths up the mountain. And like there's great boot camps now. There's honestly a lot of like just degree programs popping up, and I've had really good experiences working with interns from like University of San Francisco has a great master's program. Galvanize no longer exists, but they had a fabulous master's program. The path is becoming way more paved and it's being more established as a field, so there's going to be more standard ways in. But if you are already at a company and you're doing something that's kind of like data science adjacent, I really encourage you to explore that as an option within your company, because domain expertise is a very important part of being a good data scientist. And if you're already familiar with the product that you're working on as a non-data person, that's going to be so much easier to transition. You can always teach skills. Domain expertise is like one of the hardest things about ramping up a data person.
And I feel like this, continuing on that, I feel like, you know, you mentioned this transition from in the domain from like maybe a slightly less data role to a more data role. How daunting is that? Like, or like, have you had any experience? Have you seen people do that? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I did it. So I was an analyst before I was a data scientist, and it was scary. It always felt like people knew more than me, and I still feel like that all the time. It's one of those things where you have to spend time realizing that like you imagine like what you know is like a subset of what everyone else knows, but it's really like a Venn diagram where like you have some overlapping area that you both share, but then you both have separate areas, and everyone brings something to the table. It's also something where it's like it's super important to be humble about what you don't know. Like I work on stuff all the time now where like I'm a data scientist, people respect what I say, but it's like, I don't know anything about this part of the product. I really need to talk to someone who understands it before I start making assumptions about what this data means.
It's very scary how often people think we know so much when we don't, but that's just our secret, I guess. So that actually, the not knowing brings me to the next question, which is, data science today is such a dynamic field. Like there's just so much changing. Like the programs, the algorithms to be used, what works, what's optimal is constantly changing. And in such a dynamic field, if you want to keep growing as a leader in that, how do you stay on top of these trends? And I'm going to start with Odd for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. And I think if you have a curious mind, it's definitely a great field to be in. For me, there's like maybe two main ways. The first one is that I stay pretty close to the academic field, like by going to conferences, like reviewing papers, reading papers and so on. And the other thing is like, we're surrounded by amazing people, like all my peers and the people on my team are like all bring different things to the table. I think I really agree with the like Venn diagram image of like, we always feel like, oh, these people know so much more than me, but you also know so much more than them, just in different ways. And like learning from like peers and even like people up, people down is like things that are like the most, like the best ways to learn, at least for me.
So conferences, like, are there like, how do you figure out what conferences makes the most sense for you?
I mean, I'm mostly in like data mining, machine learning. So I like KDD is the main place where I go, but like different people nearby, like around me, go to different places. So some people might go. I was organizing WIML, which is the Women in Machine Learning workshop at Europe's last December. So I was there for that and hearing from like, I think it was like almost 300 or 400. No, wait, like maybe it's like crazy number of amazing women. Like a room full, like this entire room, like much bigger. And so that was like another opportunity. So that's more like the machine learning, deep learning side. But I think having been in academia and then like my team is also people who only come from academia, we kind of have our own ties that we keep on building on.
Sounds good. MC?
Sure. I think that's a really good question. That's also what I wondered arriving in this position. I think it's scary because you arrive with the fixed set of skills and you want to expand. So I guess the conferences are also a very good way for me to learn. Recently, for example, I was at ICML. Do not be scared if you go to conferences. You won't get the whole thing. There are so many tracks, so many talks. I don't think anyone understands every talk. Just pick a track and dive deeper into those new things, those new papers. So I think that's a really good way, blocking out like several days just for learning. You can also block a couple of hours a week to read papers, read articles. If you're more into theoretical stuff, then go to papers. But also, like, I know many companies write articles on what they just developed. I know for Uber does, but other companies like DoorDash do, Airbnb do, Lyft does. Like there are many companies who just describe what they do, how they did it, and what were the mistakes, the good points they learned. That's really helpful, especially to broaden the set of skills. And I think my answers are actually pretty similar, but do not hesitate to reach out to other people that are experts in the new domain you want to dive in. There will be people that will know, and they usually are very happy and excited to share what they know. So even if you don't hesitate to just ask someone, because usually they'll be excited to tell you more.
Your answer reminds me of me like putting blocks on my calendar, like for a couple hours saying, I have to understand this thing by the end of today. Katie?
Yeah, I'll definitely second the, like, just if someone is an expert in something that you want to learn about, reach out, because usually like no one wants to talk to them about that thing, and they're so excited to have someone to talk to. But in addition to conferences, which are great, like there are lots of really cheap ways to learn about data science, like tons of good podcasts, a bunch of really good blogs. I love email newsletters personally. And if anyone wants specifics, like I am happy to talk about it. I made a list before this because I knew someone would ask. Something that I think is important is think about like what kind of resources work for you. Podcasts are great for me because like I can listen to them when I'm going for a run or when I'm commuting or something, and I learn a lot. Twitter is great. Like Twitter, like there are tons of people talking about data science and statistics on Twitter, and like it can be super quick. You can just check in, like see what someone's thinking about something, and that fits very well into my life personally. Like I don't always have time to sit down and like read paper in depth, and like I like doing that when I can, but like there's also shorter form ways that I can get little bites and then like plants a seed in my head, and then later I'll know where to go if I need to find that information. And more broadly, I would also advise that like you can't know everything, so don't feel bad if you don't. And two techniques that I rely on a lot in terms of figuring out what I need to learn next are what do I need to know for my job and what am I interested in personally. So like right now I'm learning about Flink streaming technology because I need to use it for something that I'm working on. It's probably not something I would be reading about on my own, but super relevant to what I'm doing. It's going to unlock a lot of stuff for me later down the road. So it's great for me to be investing some time in it. And then in terms of just like something I'm personally interested in, I saw someone on my team using like a zero inflated Poisson model. And I was like, I don't really know what that is. So I found a YouTube video on it. It was like from some longer course on statistics that some professor had posted their entire course on YouTube. And the course was great. And I like have spent the past couple of weekends just watching videos from that course. And it's been super interesting. It's like not necessarily relevant to my job, but like I'm learning a ton doing it. And it's something I'm excited to get to do. And that's a great way. Like just having joy about the things that you're interested in and pursuing them is honestly like a great way to make learning sustainable.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I feel like one big difference in today's world is there's just so much open resources. Like, if you want to learn, if there's that intention, there's just no stopping in terms of like how you can do it. I love that. So I love the advice. It's very practical. One of the trendy phrases that I keep hearing all the time, it's become super common lately, is own your career. So, Odd, you have an impressive background. You're managing a big team. Like, what is own your career for you? Like, what is the advice you want to give women to own their career and other people? I mean,
yeah, I mean that's a big thing. I mean, I think the biggest thing is that like you know yourself the best, and like you should like be active in like figuring out where you want to go and how you want to get there. And in some sense, you're not there on your own and there's a ton of people around you, but in some sense, like let them help you and give them hints about like the things that you're interested about. And then that's the best way for them to know that like when there's an opportunity that comes up, it's like, oh, she said she was interested in like getting more experience with public speaking. Maybe I should invite her for that event. Or she said she was interested in getting more into like leadership or into like this really deep technical field that she wants to learn about. And like the more people around you have heard about things that were exciting to you, the more like they're gonna help you like build your career. And as I said before, like the way I've landed where I am is not something that I had planned for like the past 10, 15 years. And I've like let myself be curious and like seize opportunities as they came. So I think that's also something that you can still own your career while having a very flexible plan that's open to opportunities. And I think I would bounce back on what Katie was saying earlier, is like finding a space that like really excites you, such that what like really drives you every day is also what makes your job successful, such that you're successful without even having to like worry about it. It's just like, oh, I'm like just doing what I think is the best, and what I think is the best is what like the company or the team cares about, because like things are really well aligned. And I think if you're managing to find that spot, like that's where like you can get your career. Whereas if you feel like, oh, I need to like be strategic and do this and then do that and do that, and you may end up in places that don't really like fit you that well, that may not be the best. I mean, it works for some people, but like find your own way and let others help you do that.
I love how like this is both counterintuitive and intuitive in some sense. Like you would imagine that to get somewhere you have to like strategize the like dot of it and kind of figure out exactly where you're going. But when you're saying it, like, yeah, like just enjoy what you're doing and find what makes you happy, kind of like put more and more energy into it, and then you will find the optimal path for yourself. That's an interesting perspective. MC, I know I've personally worked with you multiple times on this. We've gone for recruiting events together, and I know you're super passionate about data science culture in the company, at Uber, and the community. So what do you wish that we, the data science industry, did differently? And what are some of the practices that you want to encourage, like some of the future women, like leaders we have in this room, to like actually think about more proactively as they kind of take on their roles and grow in their future?
Sure. So I would, I have a couple of answers, I feel like. So one thing is alignment. Don't get siloed into a sub-team on something. Share it with the other teams, discuss it, get everybody aligned on your project. I know it's not easy. At Uber, we've been sometimes failing at that. Every team would define something a different way or build an algorithm that would do, in the end, the same thing, but another way. And it takes a lot of time afterwards to go backwards, get the definition that everybody can align on and build that. So alignment is very important. And something kind of related, but communication. So developing your soft skills as well. It's, again, very easy to get siloed and develop something very, very technical, but it's also hard in a different way to share it in layman terms with different with a different public, and to just get results presented, like the key findings, like so the whole communication side of things is not to neglect, especially in the industry, because that's also what's going to get people excited about your project. And yeah, it's not necessarily something you learned in school. So that's, soft skills are also very important, and yeah, networking with people, discussing, sharing, training yourself to present. That's also very helpful, I feel like.
There's a lot of leadership aspect in data science that people don't, I think, get visibility on, which is surprising, I think, from the outside. Like, you're only as good a data scientist as you can convince people of your work. That's kind of the bottom line. That's like the bottleneck. It was a lovely chat, but this is time for some cheesiness. I love asking this question because I think it's pretty insightful. So if you were to go back in time and look at your young self, getting into this field and, you know, kind of find through your paths, what would be the one advice you would give yourself? Or maybe another way of thinking is, what was like the most helpful tip someone gave you? And the reason this is like a very insightful question, at least when I've heard the answers, is, you know, I think about, I have some leaders that I just idolize. Like, I'm like, they're like just perfect, picture perfect. There's nothing wrong with them, not a single speck. And then when I hear them answer this question, they're like, oh my God, I would go back and tell myself that, you know, you're not an imposter. It's okay. Like you've been there, you felt like you knew nothing. That was okay. The struggle is real, but that's just a signal that you're learning. And for me, that was like, oh my God, you could have felt like an imposter. I cannot believe that. So like, it's just, I feel like I always learn something from this answer. What?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things that I could have benefited from as early advice. I think one that, I mean, I still can benefit from, like I need to continue telling myself, is like, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Like that's one of the kind of sayings that we have at Facebook. We have like a bunch of inspirational posters, and this is one of them that Sheryl Sandberg also really likes. And I think for me, it's like it's really like, what are you preventing yourself from doing just because like you kind of like put these barriers around yourself? And like imposter syndrome is one reason, and there's a lot of reasons behind that. And I feel like it can come in like lots of little ways that eventually like may slow you down, or for example, like, oh, should I reach out to that like senior engineer? He looks really busy. He's not gonna have time for me. Or like, oh, can I email this person who has like director in their title? That sounds really scary. Eventually, they're all just people like us. They all want the success of the projects. And I mean, there is titles and there are like managers and hierarchies just for organizational reasons, but eventually it's not because at some point you become a manager or at some point you become a director or a VP or whatever, that like you become a different person. And like all these people, the reason they got into these roles is like usually because they love people and because they want the success. And so I think for me, it's just like, yeah, what would I do if I wasn't a friend? And kind of reaching out to people is just one small example. There's times when like someone kind of volunteered me for, it was like the intern director role, which seems like what you're doing. And I remember when I received the email, I was just like, oh my God, like there's director in the name. I can't do that. Like, this is going to be too hard for me. And then I reached out to my manager and they were just like, yeah, and if someone nominated you, it means that they think you can do it. So just go for it. I was like, okay. And then I did it. It was like really fun and I really enjoyed it. But there's like all these potential opportunities that can be missed if you're like just having like too high standards for yourself.
Your answer reminds me of someone told me, I was like, oh my God, if I send this email and this person ignores me, like, oh my God, like it's going to be so bad. And then that person was like, you know, if you don't send it, that person, like, you're not getting an answer. If you send it, the worst case is you're not getting an answer. So why don't you send it? Like, that was such a, like, I was like, obviously, yeah, sure. MC.
So I think the imposter syndrome was also very, I think most of us experience it at some point. I was at the very beginning, I was almost apologizing for my age and like my very like junior role. And I was like, okay, please know that I'm new here. And then people told me, but no, you aren't new anymore. And you gave very valid answers before. We want your opinion. So you have to own it really. And from the very beginning, tell yourself that you own this, that you are here for a reason and you can do it. So that would be, I guess, one of my answers. The other would be to keep in touch with people that you meet along your either your studies or afterwards. Just keep in touch with them. That's what's going to broaden your skills again and expand what you know. So always useful. And I had another answer. Sorry, and I had another answer that I forgot for a second, which I will tell after.
Katie.
This is maybe a little redundant with everyone else's answers, but I agree with them so much. I would tell myself, work hard, be nice, and be bold. Work hard because like that's what you're there for. Hopefully you're doing it because you love it and you're getting something out of it. You enjoy it. You find it interesting. Take joy in what you do. Be nice because the people you work with, they're going to do work for you. They're going to be the source of your next job. They're going to be people who help you get a promotion. They're going to be people who they'll get you on the project that you want to be on. And they'll just make your day pleasant. Like some of the best parts of my career have just been like having a fun lunch with one of my coworkers. And then finally, be bold. I feel like the biggest mistakes in my career have been things that I didn't do. You got to tell people what you want because then they can help you get it. Never feel bad about wanting something because you probably deserve it.
Wow, that's a powerful statement to end the conversation with. Like, I love it. Work hard. I'm gonna like remember. Work hard. I forgot it. Be bold. Be nice. Be bold. Ask what you want and don't apologize. I love it. This is amazing. I'm gonna put it down on my board when I get back. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, amazing panelists. Wonderful answers, and thank you for bearing my like not funny jokes in the middle. And thank you, everyone, for coming here and listening to us.